get to.
Oh, yeah. But, I mean, on the more serious note, there is no better place to be, for a Zimbabwean than home, than Zimbabwe. It's amazing.
What was prison like?
It was an eye-opening experience, Fadzi. Let me tell you, I learned a lot of things about Zimbabwe in prison. Then first of all, people have a certain impression about people that are in prison, particularly those that are in Chikurubi.
How would you describe them in 3 words?
The
convicts from Chikurubi.
The convicts from Chikurubi. Number one, humble people.
Okay.
Number two, honest people.
Right. Okay.
And
so it seems to be working.
Yeah,
Right.
Absolutely. And but I think more than that as well, the prison, from what I saw, is a microcosm of what Zimbabwe is like.
Right. Okay. We'll talk about that a bit just now. Good evening, viewers. Welcome to this very special edition of This Flag Thursday, where we have a conversation with Pastor Fadzayi Mahere, one of the first interviews he's doing since being out of prison. Welcome, Pastor E.
Thank you very much, Fadzi. It's like I said earlier on, the feeling of being back home on Zimbabwean soil, you cannot compete with that. It's amazing.
Now, Pastor E, one of the things that struck me about you when you entered the scene last year in 2016 is your insistence on accountability. Accountability by those who are in leadership, which is something that hitherto we had not seen. This business of asking those in authority questions and demanding some sort of accountability from them. Now, the whole concept of this flag and its essence centers around accountability, not just for those in government, but even internally. It's important for us to ask each other sometimes questions. So I'm going to get straight into it and ask. In July, there was this groundswell of support for you. I remember the courtroom experience. Lots and lots of people, thousands of people out there supporting you against these very trumped up charges. And literally within hours you were gone. Why did you leave?
I think one of the biggest things to understand is that whilst there was support, which by the way, for me is absolutely amazing to still think about what happened during that period, particularly on that day. It is outstanding to see Zimbabweans standing up for each other in that fashion. But one of the things that happened was that my family began to come under attack and under abuse.
Are you able to shed some sort of light?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was not just verbal abuse, that was being thrown around by whoever it was on social media, but physical abuse. We had groups of men showing up at our house. The night that I was in prison, a group of men had showed up at our house and demanded my wife to come out so that they could talk to her. And there's about 12 people that wanted to talk to her. The same thing happened again the next morning after I had been released. And I had actually spent the night at another location just for safety's sake. And another group of men had showed up at the house, and this time very rude and very violent, bashing on the door. And I was not prepared, and still am not prepared today, that my family is attacked at that level. My wife, and at the time she was pregnant, and my 2 little kids, who are toddlers.
Right, now I understand that must have been grueling. Is there any reason you didn't communicate that to the public? Because part of your DNA is letting out information via video. Is there any reason you didn't let people know that, so that there could have been some sort of empathy around why you left?
I think it was important, first of all, to keep them safe, but also to keep them out of what was happening around me. It's very important for me that once I do what I'm doing, that they maintain as much of a normal life as possible outside of what I'm involved in. So that's one of the reasons why, we kept them out. I made that decision that I want to keep them out of the line of focus or limelight, so that they don't continue to have any harassing coming their way.
So now that you've had an opportunity to take a step back, it's been a few months. I'm sure you've had an opportunity to reflect on everything that happened. Do you regret leaving Zimbabwe at the time that you did and in the manner that you did?
Absolutely not. I wouldn't change a thing. When you're thinking about Muriako, it's important that you do what you do for them, knowing fully well that what you're doing for them is not something that someone has told you or that you're not trying to please anyone else except them. This was for them. And so I'm glad we made the decision at the time that we made it. And I'm even happier that we moved at the time that we were able to move, because it was just in time before any of them got hurt.
Do you think maybe your communication around this issue could have been a bit stronger?
Well,
just so that people could understand, because there was a lot of disappointment, that sense of abandonment, that sense of, okay, it seemed like you're leaving because you're afraid, and yet your key mantra had been, I'm not afraid.
Let me shed light on that, on the issue of being afraid. Before I do that, you're right. I think there's some things that could have been done better in terms of the communication, maybe, and so forth. But this is a time where things are happening fast. There is no time to breathe. There's no time to, think about putting a proper strategy together. So things were happening fast. But I do understand the sense of disappointment that people had. I would be foolish to say, Kutizwa, at that point when things happened in that fashion, I was fully in a place where I was saying, Andisukuchka, I'm human, dirimunu, unochka. And that happened to me. And if anyone who has ever faced what I faced would ever say, Kuti, I've never been afraid, or they're lying. So definitely that fear was there. And it was necessary for me to face it. Even, in subsequent events, when I then did come back, it was necessary for me to face that fear and let the real Ivan develop and grow, and not have some fake, person who pretends.
Okay, that's fair enough. But that fear must still be around. I mean, very little has changed in as far as our government and their political response to people like you, people who speak out, and so on. So I think the question that's exercising a lot of people's minds is, why come back home now? We know Zimbabwe is home, but why now? What's changed? I mean, the system is just as brutal as it was, 6 or however many months ago. So why now? Why today?
The decision for me to come back was not made the day I came back or a few weeks before I came back. The decision to come back home to Zimbabwe was made on the day that I left Zimbabwe. And if you follow all my communications that I made, whether on video or through interviews, I always said, I'm going back to Zimbabwe. I'm going back to Zimbabwe. I'm going back to Zimbabwe. Why now?
Where had you gone?
Well, we took our family out and into South Africa, and after we had some other incidences there that again were not safe for us, we then moved our family out to the United States. We were already scheduled to travel to the United States later on in the year, and so we just took the advantage to travel much earlier instead of much later.
I understand, and we'll come back to why now in a minute. I know I cut you off there, but one of the reports that came out when you went to the States is, an allegation that you'd sought asylum. Did you seek asylum? Have you sought asylum in the United States?
If I had sought asylum, I wouldn't have come back. And I mean, I was obviously reading all the reports. In fact, some people swore that I had already been given a green card. And there were all sorts of stories about he sought asylum, he's never going to come back, and he's been given citizenship. If I had been given citizenship, or if asylum is what I wanted, I wouldn't have come back. By all accounts, I had a very strong case for asylum. So that's not what I went there for. I'm glad that I was able to fulfill my promise of coming back home to Zimbabwe to prove that indeed we have scaled the wall of fear. It's a journey. We've scaled the wall of fear, and we're at another level as well.
Are you back for good?
Of course, I'm back for good. I'm back.
Now, we're just going to go to some of the comments that were, raised on Facebook. There's a lady called Jackie who asks, and I quote, "What are you willing to do to win back the trust of the people who feel like you betrayed the revolution?" Close quotes.
I think there has to be an understanding that I'm not trying to win back the trust of people, because that was not the original intention. I was not trying to get people to follow me. I was trying to get people to follow their hearts, to believe in themselves. The question is, don't try and trust Ivan. Don't try and believe in Ivan. Believe in yourself. How much do you believe in the change that you want for Zimbabwe? That's what's important. And so, but coming back to that as well, yes, it is important. I think that my coming back already, if that is not enough for anyone who had lost faith in some of my beliefs or thinkings, then I'm not sure that anything else will be enough. And again, you have to understand that we don't have time for me to be trying to prove myself to you. Let's get going on what needs to be done now.
Okay, we're going to come back in a minute to what needs to be done now. But we touched on this earlier, but I think it's important to probe it a little bit more. Your mantra, at least before you left, was Hatichada, Hatichachka. Now, what's left of that mantra now? We don't see you using it as a hashtag anymore. Has the message ingrained in that mantra changed?
Actually, my first video after I came out of Chikurubi prison contained that hashtag, Hatichada, Hatichachka, asisafuni njalo asisesabi, fed up and not afraid. Why? Because my coming back, for me, is the fulfillment of that. Did I expect that I would be arrested at the airport or anywhere after I'd entered? Of course, there was that expectation. I knew I was going to have to face some kind of persecution. And so for me, it is a re-emphasizing of that mantra, because it is the key for the citizens to get involved, to take Zimbabwe where it should go.
Now let's talk a little bit about the involvement of the citizens. And Afrobella, again on Facebook, asks, what are your expectations of the citizens? You asked people to rally behind you then after that you said you're not the leader, and after that you called them haters. So what's your call to action for the citizens? Do you still expect them to rally behind you and the cause of this flag, or has it changed to something different?
I go back again to what this flag is about. It's not about an individual. This flag is not about Ivan Mawarire. Don't rally behind an individual. And I did not at any point ask people to rally behind me. Not once did I do that. I asked people to wake up to the issues in our country and begin to stand up for Zimbabwe, particularly in the first video that I ever did. And I said, this flag, don't expect this flag to fly proudly if you stand on the sidelines and do nothing about it.
But do you not agree that, sometimes people need coordination, galvanizing, a rallying point, somebody to coordinate this speaking out? Otherwise, it becomes a little bit haphazard and disjointed. And the unity, you spoke of unity at New Year's. Isn't it important to galvanize people around a cause and sometimes have some strong leadership around even a citizens' movement?
Oh yeah, it absolutely is important to do that. But before you even have the coordination, it's important that people understand why they're doing what they're doing. Without that full understanding, you can try and mobilize people as much as you want, but you've got to conscientize. And this is where the success of this flag was. If you saw, there was the 25 days of the videos that I did from the 1st of May to the 25th of May. And I did 25 videos. And in those 25 videos, my job was to conscientize as many people as I could to what the issues were. Understand the issues. And if you understand the issues, you become invested yourself in the mobilization that's beginning to take place.
What would you say the key issues are right now in Zimbabwe? You've been in the US for some months. Are you still in touch with the current issues bedeviling the nation now? Has there been some sort of a shift? Have you managed to keep up?
I've managed to keep up quite well. Obviously, the physical distance means that you are not as in contact, direct contact with the issues as much as you can. But when we started out, our issues were based around 3 points: corruption, injustice, and poverty. And even now on my return, that hasn't changed. Those still remain the issues in Zimbabwe. For example, we have a $15 billion issue that is still unexplained. No one has been arrested. There has been no commission of inquiry. And we still have government ministers who have their hands in public funds and they are not being brought to account. And it's open. These are things that are known. The issues of injustice, besides myself, people like Pastor Mugadza, who have been incarcerated for such a long time. There's so many other people that have been incarcerated or treated. Yes,
Okay. So the issues are poverty, injustice, and corruption, and it's important for citizens to rally around those issues. Mulungisi on Facebook says, what guarantee, if any, can you give to the ordinary citizen that you will not desert the movement again, leaving those who rally behind you at the hands or mercy of the regime?
My coming back, I go back again to the fact of my coming back. My coming back for me is, first of all, a personal statement. It's not something that I did for people to believe in me. But this is a personal mission. This is a personal journey. Pandaka Tanga, when I started Fadzi, it was about my family. Right. I was fighting a battle. No, you can't do this to my children as well, right? So, in terms of guarantees, I'm not going to sit here and say to the people of Zimbabwe, I'm going to guarantee you that I'm always going to be with you, and in fact, we're going to see ABC result. No, it's not. That's not my place to do. What we have to do as Zimbabweans is get to a place where we understand that the savior mentality of expecting one person to do the job for us is not going to work. Where we are going now is for as many people to do what I have done and more. And there are people that have been doing even more than me prior to me coming, who on them is the foundation that we built this flag.
But I think maybe the distinguishing feature with you is that we saw people galvanize around national symbols, symbols of citizenship and national identity in a manner that was hitherto unknown. Mm-hmm. People have obviously over the last 10, 20 years rallied around political parties and political figures, but never have we seen this rallying around a cause that's just to do with national identity. Just appropriating the flag as my own. Mm-hmm. I now have a flag in my house. Mm-hmm. That never used to happen. Mm-hmm. We used to have a situation where people would just see the flag in a government office. Mm-hmm. So isn't it important for that sort of national identity vision to be championed, if you like, by someone without expecting a savior, but just someone to champion the cause and, continue with that level of inspiration?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's okay for someone to champion the cause. The problem comes when we abdicate our positions and we go to bed and say he's looking after it. That's where the problem is. We have to have ownership of this change or of this process 100%. That's why even as we start to go forward, the mobilization we're doing has got to come with a lot of conscientization. It's got to come with a lot of ownership that comes through the knowledge of the issues and also the tools available to us for change. We have to communicate these things and get ownership of things like this flag and the other movements to the lowest person in our society. When I say lowest, I'm talking about in terms of assimilation. We have to communicate and to get as many of those people involved so that this becomes a guaranteed success, like the question.
And I'm sure the example of the last few months will show you that sometimes it takes certain people with that inspiration to run forward.
Absolutely.
So I come to maybe something that's separate but related, your political plans. Mm-hmm. I'll start with a question by Lucas, again on Facebook, and I'm going to quote it verbatim. Mm-hmm. It begs reading. He said, Pastor, word has it that you have made contact with Noah Manyika and discussed joining hands in a political venture of your own. To what extent is this true? If true, do you believe that you've got the capacity to mobilize people in 1 year and form a movement enough to pose a challenge? What is it that you would then stand for that differentiates you from the rest of the opposition? Additionally, will you have the financial capabilities to do outreach programs in rural areas where internet activism will yield little success? Also, who is and will be financing you? So I just asked it
as it is.
As it was asked. So what's your response to Lucas?
Okay, so first and foremost, Dr. Noah Manyika is somebody that I met in the United States as a Zimbabwean, very passionate man about Zimbabwe, and someone who has proved his passion and his desire to see change by putting together a vehicle that I believe at this point, from the information I've heard, is already now on the ground and is beginning to make traction. He himself, I believe, is already on the ground in Zimbabwe here as well. Now, I did not return at the behest of Dr. Noah Manyika, and neither have we arranged any partnership or any joining of any sort with the initiative that they're doing.
You are or you're not in political bed with him?
No, I'm not. No, okay. No, not at all, yeah.
On those points of convergence, I need a yes or no answer here. Mm-hmm. Is this flag going to transform itself into a political party?
No.
Okay, we'll come to your vision for this flag in due course. We're going to shift a little bit to the prisons and the political system. Now, Honorable Supamandi Wanzira, the Minister for ICT here in Zimbabwe, in a conversation with the UK Ambassador, Ms. Catriona Lang, last week indicated that you arrested when you landed at Harare International Airport because you had quote-unquote skipped bail. Did you skip your bail conditions?
Absolutely not. I think it's on public record, what transpired.
What have you done to rectify the suggestion, if anything?
Well, I think the first thing I did was that I did the honorable thing and sent a message directly to the honorable minister and asked him to retract his statement and to apologize, because it's, first of all, it is an untruth, and secondly, because of the constituency that he was speaking to. He's speaking to a diplomatic envoy to Zimbabwe, and he is speaking in his capacity as a government minister and a government representative. And it's important, again, that people like me, ordinary Zimbabweans, can challenge government ministers when they are wrong. And so I sent that out to him and demanded a retraction and an apology for that statement.
What was his reaction when you made that demand?
Well, the first thing that happened was that he blocked me on Twitter.
That's unfortunate.
Which is very unfortunate. Now, here's the thing. For me, it's very telling of the way our government treats its citizens. That when you come out and you charge them for accountability, they block you. What Super did is a microcosm of what our government has done to the citizens of Zimbabwe. We have been crying since, at least with the social movements, since April of 2015, of 2016 until now. And not once have they called us to sit down at a table and talk with us. Instead, we have been beaten, we have been arrested, we have been wrongly charged, we have been labeled terrorists and all sorts of names. And it's unfortunate that a government does this to a people that are so passionate.
So what response would you have expected from the minister the minute you drew his attention to this misrepresentation?
As an honorable man, I would have expected him to immediately apologize directly to myself, to apologize to Zimbabweans, because an injustice to one is an injustice to all, and to also make amends with the envoy whom he was speaking with as well.
I note that he has issued out a tweet apologizing. Does this take away any of your sort of angst around his response?
I think if it is something that is done genuinely and with sincerity, it's very much welcome. I'm not the kind of person who will hold a grudge forever. If he is truly apologetic, as he has said, I haven't seen the statement completely myself, but if he is sincerely and genuinely apologetic, then it is very much well appreciated. And my hope is that this is the direction that this government will begin to take.
Right. It's often said that people of the cloth, that's your priests, your pastors, your men of God, to use that very, loved Zimbabwean term, should stick to church issues and should not meddle in political, governance, or civic affairs. What sort of message do you wish to convey to the church concerning their role in bringing about change and progress in Zimbabwe? Now, my context in asking you this question relates to what you said in the Newsday on, I think it was Tuesday, in an interview that was shared there, where you indicated that, your numbers at church have even dwindled, meaning that people aren't used to a quote-unquote man of God speaking out against the government and getting involved in politics. What sort of message do you want to send?
First, just to answer your question, or to at least comment on that, first and foremost, yes, there has been that insinuation from different quarters that pastors or men of religion should not be involved in politics. And nothing could be further from the truth. First and foremost, I am a citizen before I am a pastor. And if I vote, then I speak, no matter what the issue is. The Constitution is not for just people that are not pastors and pastors. We've got to stick with our Bibles. If there is anyone who should stand up for issues of social justice and for issues that affect the ordinary people in a nation, it is pastors. We are the ones who have got the mandate to be able to come and, particularly on moral issues, come and say you cannot do this.
So some will say, instead of confronting the government and making all this noise, you should pray, you should fast, you should seek God, seek a spiritual solution, a resolution of the crisis. What's your reaction to that?
Well, when you go through the Bible, one of the things you need to see is that men and women prayed for solutions. But when they prayed for solutions, they were willing to go and confront the issue that they were praying about.
I see.
And I've often said this to people, that if you pray about an issue and you're not prepared to get up from your knees and go and get involved in the answer, then you might as well not have really prayed that prayer.
Well, let's look at an example of one man of God who has done exactly what you propose, speaking out and taking some sort of action in addition to their spiritual responsibility. Pastor Mugadza. Now, Pastor Mugadza recently prophesied that the president would die in about October of this year. This is one of the reasons he is currently in remand prison. Now, do you, as a pastor, as a man of God, think it's appropriate for another man of God to venture into such territory, prophesying the death of a leader?
I'm not completely sure what drove Pastor Mugadza. In fact, I've never met him before. However, I am inspired by his spirit of seeking justice, or at least his spirit of standing up for Zimbabweans, because it's not just the prophecy that he has done. Pastor Mugadza would go and chain himself near Parliament to show the parliamentarians the state of Zimbabweans. And that takes a lot of guts. It takes a lot of creativity and resolve to be able to do that. Insofar as the prophecy concerning the death of the head of state, it's not something that I would do. I would need to understand where he was coming from. Is that something that he felt? Is it a campaign of some sort? And I'm not sure what it's about in terms of where he was going with it.
Do you think it falls within the bounds of free speech, free conscience that are constitutionally guaranteed? Do you think it's appropriate? I
think that it does fall within the bounds of free speech. It may not be culturally appropriate, but I think it falls within the bounds of free speech.
Now, Thaddeus on Facebook has asked in his comment, what are you, Pastor Mahere, doing to help the other pastor, and that's Pastor Mugadza, who is fighting for the same cause as you and is detained at Remand? So what sort of action have you taken, if any, to mobilize around his cause? Because you know what it's like to have your liberty withdrawn from you, and to be at the mercy of a system that doesn't always uphold constitutional and rule of law principles.
Using the medium that I have used over the last couple of months to highlight the issues of Zimbabwe, I have made calls to the Zimbabwean government to release the man, or to at least expedite the matters that he's being charged for. The length of time that he has been in incarceration is not something that is fair at all in the dealing of the matters that he's being charged with. In addition to that, some members of This Flag team, together in discussion, have been able to go and visit him and take him supplies and see that he is well. And I've been part of the discussions even before I arrived back in Zimbabwe to make sure that he is well. I will be hopefully going to visit him. I'm not sure if I'm allowed at the cells. I am informed that once you have been in the cells, a certain period has to elapse before you come back to visit any other inmates there.
Right. Now, I need a yes or no answer again. Would you ever consider running for president at some point in the future?
At some point in the future? Maybe.
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 So you don't rule it out?
Yeah, no, and this is like I said the last time. And no. Munhu ngaapuwe chance yekuita zvinhu zvaanofungidzira kuti zvinobatsira. Let a person be able to do things that they think or that they see may be able to bring change. So I don't want to close that door and say, no, I don't want. If the opportunity presents itself, and if we are able to, and particularly if we get to a point where, with counsel, we believe that that is the right way to go, why not?
Now, Pastor E, you've indicated that this flag is not going to transform itself into a political party. I presume that will be the case even if you do decide to enter into politics. Am I right in that?
Oh yes, 100% you're right. It has to continue as a citizen movement that is not aligned to any individual's aspirations for office.
Why do you think that's important?
I go back to the issue of galvanizing, or should I say uniting Zimbabweans from as many departure points as possible. So we may come from different schools of thought in our religion, but when it comes to our nation, we have to find a convergence zone. We may come from different departure points in terms of our political thought, but when it comes to Zimbabwe, we must have a convergence zone. And I think that the citizens' movement or the citizens' movements allow for that space, where people that have got different views about what politics should be like, or what religion should be like, or what raising kids should be like, they all find that space where they say we have the same cause in this space.
Now, in the event that you don't enter politics, and you've said already that this flag is not going to morph into a political party, what is the citizen movement's game plan for 2018? because I don't think you disagree that, civic engagement includes electoral participation, registering to vote, being involved in the political process. Is there going to be an endorsement model, an alliance of some sort, a loose coalition, understanding with someone or a party? What sort of form will the game plan for citizens in 2018 take?
You've laid out some of the things that I think will be critical. Again, the decisions about the activities of this flag are not made by one person. I operate within a team, and the team is helping us to drive some of the activities that are critical.
Is that team open to suggestions from the public?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And it's not that we are now going to be open. We have already been open. I'll give you a good idea. If you remember, we had a protest we did at the cricket game in Bulawayo last year.
While you were in the States.
Whilst I was in South Africa.
Yes.
That was an idea. That was an idea that came through from a regular citizen, someone whom to this day I have never met.
Right.
And they just sent us a message and said, this is a good idea. Do you think we can make it work? We took it up and we made it work, and it worked beautifully.
So how do people get more involved? Who do they contact? What mode or medium of communication should they use if they want to get involved, if they want to participate, as opposed to just, sitting behind their keyboard or their computer or their phone and just watching the videos and watching? What else? What active steps can they take? Who do they contact?
The beauty about the technology era is that it has brought us all into one place globally.
Right.
And so if people have got contributions to make on social media, we've got our various presence there, our various accounts. So we've got our Facebook page, which is this flag, iflaglei mreza uyu. You can send messages to that in terms of what your ideas are.
Right.
We may not pick them up straight away, but definitely they will be seen, and somehow there will be some contact or recognition that you've sent. That same thing with Twitter as well. We have this flag 1980. Right. You can get a hold of us through there. But here's what's really fun. The Zimbabweans that have different abilities or different giftings or different things that they can do, I think there's an openness to that. Whether if you're in the legal fraternity, we need you to come and help us and to advise. Because remember, we started this is a pastor who started this.
Right.
I don't know some of the legal implications of what I am doing, or I don't know what I'm missing out that could help me. We need people from the business fraternity to help us to understand things like bond notes. When we went and we sat down with the governor and we said we don't want the bond notes, I remember very well one of the first things we did, we invited a legal expert who happened to be you.
Look at us now.
And look at us now. Look how far we've come. But that helped us a lot. We brought in someone who knew better than us what needs to be done.
So you're saying then that the movement is open to people who know better and to critique and
yes.
People who want to make a contribution.
Exactly.
Now, let's talk a little bit about the vision and going forward. Last year, some of the protests that were initiated by yourself and this flag involved shutting down Zimbabwe, non-violent protests such as singing the national anthem at the cricket match in Bulawayo, something that you made reference to. Are we going to see any more protests of that nature in 2017 and as we go into the elections in 2018?
I think it's hard to predict that.
Yes.
And hard to say, no, we're not going to do it, because there is a lot of dynamics in Zimbabwe that sometimes we are not in full control of. So whilst it may not be my full desire to send people on the streets, sometimes things happen on their own. And what we're seeing in Zimbabwe is a rapid escalation of the issues or the dissatisfaction. So sometimes that is something that we cannot predict, but I think it's something that we can direct, particularly when it comes to the non-violent aspect of how we protest or how we demonstrate. It's so important, and in fact, that's one of the things that I want to continue to champion, that the issue that you can do more without violence than you would do with violence.
And is it effective though? Is this non-violent protest model effective? Does it bring about any form of change, and does it make a difference? I
think it does in a very big way. When you look at how far we've come as citizens in Zimbabwe, a lot more of us are now willing to stand up to some of the injustices or the corruption or the poverty or whatever it is we're unhappy about, because we now know that there are other ways of standing up. So we have learned of class actions, by the way, things that many people didn't know, that you can take the government to court. We have learned of certain provisions within the Constitution. We've learned, when I was arrested, I had no idea that I had been brought to court illegally by the state, and learned it when the ruling was passed that I had been, my constitutional rights had been violated. So I think there are tools that we can now use to be more effective in the way we protest. If we teach each other to be non-violent, it means that we are without blemish, but we can be within the law and use our own constitution to be able to get the things that we want.
Pastor E, is there anything that this flag has planned for those in the rural areas who don't have access to Facebook, to Twitter, to Instagram, and all the other snazzy ways that this flag has adopted to raise awareness around various issues and to communicate and sometimes even protest?
The beauty about the citizens' movements in Zimbabwe is that they have taken different forms based on the strengths that they have found amongst those that have gotten involved. And this flag may not be present deep in Mudzio, in Mkumbura, or in Gokwe, but they are young Zimbabweans that have started different expressions, and we have already begun to form alliances with some of these wonderful movements.
Can you give examples of some for those who might not be familiar?
There is an amazing movement called Zimbabwe Yadzoka. Right. And Zimbabwe Yadzoka, started by Dr. Victor Chimutu and a group of young Zimbabweans, is focused on the rural areas.
I see.
That is their niche. They've said, this is where we want to go and conscientize. This is where we want to go and show people that they can make a change if they are not happy with the situation. So we are partnering with Zimbabwe Yadzoka so that what we do effectively, we can do for them or help them with that. Or the other way, what they do effectively, we can also do. But also we are partnering on messaging.
Right.
That we are sending out the same message. We're doing the same thing, but in different ways and achieving the same goal, same result.
Right. Now, what is that message? And connected to that, what is the plan for this flag in the future? Where is it going? What's the vision? What's the drive going forward?
Well, we have 3 key actions that we identified at the beginning of this flag. And one of the things that excites me, Fadz, is that we did all of this without a big conference on vision and so forth. But we came up with 3 actions: speak, ask, act. That every Zimbabwean must be prepared and must learn how to speak again. Every Zimbabwean must be prepared to ask, which is accountability. And every Zimbabwean must be prepared to act, which is to get involved and do what needs to be done. The broader idea of this flag, and what we are asking even other social movements to do, is to get involved in the unprecedented mobilization and conscientizing of Zimbabweans everywhere.
Right.
That,
you say everywhere, what are you talking about? Within the country?
I'm talking about physically in Zimbabwe,
right.
And I'm talking about the diaspora, because we are one.
Okay. Now, what is your vision for Zimbabwe?
I think my vision for Zimbabwe is contained in the thought that we must create a country that allows ideas to challenge each other. A country that allows us to interrogate ideas and not people. One that allows us to nyika inobvumira vanhu vayo kuti vavake nyika. This is what I'm going for. A Zimbabwe where Zimbabweans want to stay instead of going. We talk with some of our friends, kuti, in Zimbabwe, the one thing that young people want to do is they want to leave.
Right.
I really want us to see a Zimbabwe that invites the diaspora back with what they have learned, with their connections, with their thoughts, with their knowledge, and join in with the Zimbabweans at home, with their skills, their thoughts, and their knowledge, and take this country into a place that we all know it should be in. Most importantly, that this country can regain that honorable place amongst the nations of the world.
Now, Pastor E, what would you say is the most important lesson that you've learnt in as far as the citizens movement goes over the last 8 or so months of your journey?
I've learned over the last couple of months, Fadzi, that it takes a seed to get a harvest. And that it takes a drop of water and many drops of water joined together to get a flood. I've learned that not one person can be responsible for change in a community or in a nation or globally. That it takes all of us being responsible to bring the kind of change that we need to have.
It takes all of us, which draws me to the closing idea that this flag would be nowhere. In fact, it would be a non-existent construct without the people who've rallied behind it, without the people who've supported you, the people who've supported the cause,
Absolutely.
who've demonstrated passion for country. What last message would you like to give to those people who have supported you, who have rallied around this flag? In closing, what message, last words would you like to give to them?
I think my last words, Fadzayi, or my message is something that I've continued to say, but I want to rehash it in this moment. That the things that unite us are more than the things that divide us if we pay attention. But more importantly, we are at a point in this country, in Zimbabwe, where a generation of people is prepared to do things that we last heard of in the Liberation War. Young people are saying, I want to see a better Zimbabwe. There is no better time to be Zimbabwean than now, than today. And if we all together join hands, if we put our differences aside, if we stop the suspicions, and if we begin to realize that it's for me and for my children, I'm telling you, we could see something that nobody thought is possible in the nation of Zimbabwe.
Pastor E, unfortunately our time has run out, so all that remains is for me to thank you for sitting down, because internal accountability is something that, as I indicated, right from the start is key. That's how we form the connections. That's how we, continuously ensure that we're accountable to each other, we're accountable to the people that, we're trying to galvanize, and, we keep the institution strong. And also, if we want to bring about change in Zimbabwe, it's important that we are the change. And if we expect those who are governing over us to answer questions, we must certainly be open to being asked those questions. So thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank all those who have contributed on our various platforms, on Facebook and on Twitter, and have asked questions, all those who engaged with us over today's conversation with Pastor Fadzayi Mahere. We'd also like to make a special mention, say a special thank you to all of those who have supported the cause of this flag. And as we go forward, let's galvanize together, because at the end of the day, as Pastor E said, what brings us together is much bigger, much stronger, and much more magical than the things that divide us. So let's unite, as he said in his New Year's message, around this idea of bringing about a better Zimbabwe. And let's all ensure that we play our part. Thank you very much, and good evening.
Cut.
Are we good?
Super. Super, super.
Thanks, team.
Great.
All right, guys. No, I'm good.
Are you sure?
Oh, no, I'm good. I'm sure.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you. We had a meal before we came.
I like that. Good job.
Thanks. Well done, Fadzayi. I think that came out really good.
That worked well. And
Good job.
Well, it felt like we hit the right.
Yeah. Well, let's see what.